Imagine a world where economic power dictates geopolitical dominance, not just military might. Where the most feared weapon isn't a bomber, but a port closure. Not a tank, but a chip shortage. Not an invasion, but a single email that says, "Export license denied." As tensions rise and alliances shift, many are asking, could the true battleground of a new Cold War be hidden in our global supply chains? And if that's true, is supply chain resilience the ultimate weapon? Welcome to the Golden Route. Today we're going to investigate a simple, unsettling idea. In the next era of conflict, the winner may not be the nation with the biggest army, but the nation that can keep its factories running, its shelves stocked, its energy flowing, and its technology upgrading, even while being attacked economically. 1. Supply chains are the new battlefield. Think of a modern nation like a living body. Energy is the oxygen. Semiconductors are the nervous system. Shipping lanes are the arteries. Ports are the heart valves. And logistics? Logistics is the blood. If you can cut the blood supply, you don't need to fire a shot. You can weaken an economy, fracture political stability, trigger inflation, and force governments into desperate choices. This is why supply chains have become strategic, because they are where prosperity is manufactured. For decades, the world built a system optimized for one thing: efficiency. Just in time, lowest cost, fastest route, single supplier because it's cheaper. But efficiency has a hidden weakness. It works perfectly until it doesn't. And once geopolitics enters the room, efficiency becomes a liability. 2. Weaponized interdependence, the invisible leverage. There's a concept in modern geopolitics that explains what's happening. Weaponized interdependence, the idea that global networks create chokepoints, and states that control those hubs can turn them into tools of coercion. In other words, globalization didn't just connect the world, it created control nodes. And whoever controls the node can observe flows, information and trade, pressure companies, block access, punish rivals, and reward allies. This is why a new Cold War doesn't require iron curtains. It requires export controls, sanctions, licensing rules, standards, and control over logistics. You don't need to conquer territory if you can deny access. 3. The proof is happening now. Shipping as a pressure point. Let's take something simple: shipping lanes. In early 2024, attacks and instability around the Red Sea disrupted one of the world's most vital maritime corridors, and major shippers rerouted, driving up costs and delays. The IMF reported that in the first 2 months of 2024, Suez Canal trade dropped around 50% compared to a year earlier, contributing to supply chain disruption. Think about what that means. A handful of disruptions in one region can ripple across. European inventories, Asian exports, insurance markets, shipping schedules, and ultimately, consumer prices. Now zoom out. If a supply chain shock can trigger inflation waves and political panic, then resilience becomes a form of deterrence. Because the strongest threat isn't the strike. It's the ability to survive the strike without blinking. 4. Semiconductors, the new oil. If oil powered the 20th century, chips power the 21st. Chips are inside weapon systems, phones, cars, satellites, medical devices, AI infrastructure. Now ask yourself, if chips are the nervous system of modern power, what happens if your supply is cut? This is why the US passed the Chips and Science Act, to boost domestic semiconductor manufacturing and strengthen supply chain resilience. And it's not just America. Across the world, governments have realized something uncomfortable. If your economy depends on a supply chain you don't control, then your sovereignty is partly outsourced. That's not a business problem anymore. That's a national security problem. 5. Critical minerals, the hidden choke point. Now let's talk about the materials behind everything. Critical raw materials. Rare earths, lithium, cobalt, nickel. These are the ingredients for EV batteries, Wind turbines, defense technology, advanced electronics. The European Union moved to address this with its Critical Raw Materials Act, aiming to monitor supply chains, stress test risks, and reduce dependency on single third countries for strategic materials. That's not just environmental policy, that's a strategic survival policy. Because if one rival controls processing capacity or export permissions, your entire industrial strategy becomes hostage. 6. Resilience isn't just defense, it's a weapon. Here's the key pivot. Most people hear resilience and think, okay, so we'll survive disruptions. But in geopolitical reality, resilience can become something more. Because resilience does two things at the same time. It makes you harder to hurt. It makes your threats more credible. 7. The new arms race. Not nukes, networks. So what does a supply chain arms race look like? It looks like onshoring critical production, friendshoring with trusted allies, strategic stockpiles, redundant routes, domestic energy security, and massive subsidies for key industries. It looks like nations redesigning the bloodstream of their economy so it can keep flowing under attack. And here's the twist. This race doesn't just happen between states. It happens through corporations, ports, insurers, banks, and tech ecosystems. This is why the new Cold War is so hard to see. Because it doesn't always fly flags, it flies spreadsheets. 8. Cliffhanger. The price of resilience. Now let's get real. Resilience sounds powerful, but it comes with a price. Redundancy costs money, onshoring costs money, stockpiles cost money, diversification costs money. So the next question becomes, if resilience is the ultimate weapon, who can afford it, and who gets left exposed? Because in a world where logistics is power, the most dangerous position is this, being dependent, while everyone else is preparing for conflict. And that brings us to Part 2. Part 2. Economic fortresses, choke points, and the blueprint for winning without war. So if supply chain resilience is becoming a weapon, then Part 2 is about the blueprint. Because right now, nations are quietly building economic fortresses. Not walls of concrete, walls of capacity, factories, refineries, ports, stockpiles, allied trade corridors, and trusted tech ecosystems. The goal is simple. Keep the system running even if the world fractures. And once a nation can do that, it can project power in a new way. 1. The real goal, logistical invulnerability. Military strength is obvious, economic strength is visible. But logistical invulnerability, that's stealth power. It means your food supply doesn't break your energy supply, doesn't collapse your industry, doesn't stop your defense production, isn't delayed, and your technology doesn't freeze. In a long conflict, hot or cold, what matters isn't the first month. It's the 5th year. And the 5th year belongs to whoever can still produce. 2. Case study, Red Sea disruption. Shows the new fragility. Remember the Red Sea disruption example? It wasn't World War, but it was a stress test, and it proved a brutal point. Even partial disruption in a key corridor can distort costs and timelines globally. The IMF emphasized these disruptions as supply chain shocks that can affect macro indicators and inflation dynamics. Now imagine something worse. Multiple choke points stressed simultaneously, cyber attacks on port logistics, sanctions restricting insurance export controls, blocking key components. That's not hypothetical. Those are tools already used. 3. The semiconductor fortress strategy. The U.S. approach has been blunt. Rebuild capacity at home and with allies. The CHIPS and Science Act is designed to strengthen domestic semiconductor production and research, explicitly connected to supply chain resilience and strategic competition. And it's not just legislation, it's an industrial mobilization. Investment announcements, new fabs, workforce pipelines, this is what economic defense spending looks like. Because if chips are constrained, modern power slows down. AI defense systems, communications, manufacturing, transportation. And if a nation can ensure a stable chip pipeline while rivals face shortages, that advantage compounds over time. 4. Critical minerals. diversify, or be dependent. Europe's critical raw materials act is a direct response to concentrated dependency risks and aims to improve monitoring, stress testing, and strategic planning for supply security. Notice the mindset shift. This is no longer free market will solve it. This is we must prepare for disruption as a permanent condition. And once disruption becomes permanent, resilience becomes strategic. 5. Resilience can become offensive. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When you build resilience, you're not just insulating yourself, you're also increasing your ability to pressure others. Because if you can replace dependency, you can enforce restrictions without self-harm. That's the logic behind weaponized interdependence. Control choke points and hubs, and you can coerce through networks. So the offense isn't always bombs. It's export controls, sanctions, shipping access data access standards, compliance financing restrictions. It's you can't participate unless you follow our rules. 6. The trade-off. Resilience is expensive. Now we hit the big tension. Resilience requires redundancy. Redundancy raises costs, and higher costs can mean higher prices, slower growth, political backlash, and inequality between resilient blocs and vulnerable states. So resilience has a paradox. It can prevent collapse, but it can also create a world that is more divided, more expensive, and more tense. Because if every nation tries to secure supply chains by pulling production inward, the global system becomes less efficient and more suspicious, and suspicion fuels escalation. 7. What actually makes a supply chain resilient? Let's get practical. The strongest resilience strategies usually combine 5 layers. Layer 1, redundancy, multiple suppliers, multiple regions, multiple routes. Layer 2, stockpiles, strategic reserves for critical inputs, fuel, medicines, chips, minerals. Layer 3, allied ecosystems, friendshoring, building capacity inside trusted networks. Layer 4, visibility, knowing where components come from and where they can break. Layer 5, rapid adaptation, the ability to reroute, substitute, and scale quickly. This is why resilience is less about one miracle solution, and more about building a system that can bend without breaking. 8. The new deterrence. We can outlast you. In classic Cold War logic, deterrence meant, if you strike, we strike back. In this new era, deterrence can also mean, if you disrupt us, we keep functioning, and you don't. That's a terrifying advantage because it shifts the strategic balance. A state with logistical invulnerability can hold a line longer, fund its defense longer, maintain social stability longer, and outproduce rivals. And production is destiny. Wars, cold wars, and long competitions are won by the side that can sustain. Nine. The final question. Is resilience the ultimate weapon? So is supply chain resilience the ultimate weapon in a new Cold War? Here's the answer. It may not replace military power, but it increasingly decides whether military power can be sustained. Because missiles don't manufacture themselves, armies don't feed themselves, and technology doesn't appear by magic. Behind every symbol of power is a supply chain. And in the new Cold War, the most decisive advantage might be the ability to keep those chains unbroken, even while under pressure. That's 10. Ending plus engagement. Hook. So here's the question for you. If the next Cold War is fought through networks, choke points, and logistics, what matters more? Building alliances or building self-sufficiency? Comment one word, allies or self. If you want, the next video can go even deeper into the most important choke points: semiconductors, rare earth processing, energy corridors, and the financial rails that move global trade. This is the Golden Route, where we follow the real power, the systems underneath the headlines. Stay alert. stay strategic, and I'll see you in the next one.